Hi, and welcome to Women at Work, The Woe Factor. I'm your host, Mary Eileen Williams, and this show is all about connecting you with experts, tips, and strategies to help you make the most of this very special time of life. Our guest today is Susan Critton. Susan is a master personal brand strategist and the author of this fabulous book, Personal Branding for Dummies. And she's taking time out of her very busy schedule to join us today and share ways that you can not only reinvent your life, but also create a brand that will help you share your special talents, gifts, and abilities in ways that are personally meaningful for you. So welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, we have heard the term personal branding, and I kind of like to start out with a basic question because, again, that term does get thrown around a lot. But for people like me who are kind of everyday people, and I would assume many of the people watching us would say the same thing about themselves, why is it important for us to have a personal brand? What does it have to do with our everyday lives?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about it is we really have a personal brand whether we want to think about it or not. And what a personal brand is, it's the way people remember you. And so very simply, people get, there's all this hype about it and there's a lot of things written about it. And really the more complicated piece of it is that what personal branding is guiding people to really look at who they are, how they come across to other people, and how they influence other people's decisions about the way they think about them. So that was complicated, but what I really mean to say is it's really just how people remember you when you leave the room. And I recently had something, and this was a good example of this. I spoke to a church group of job seekers, and one of the people who was the hostess of the group has known me for quite a while, and she said, "Oh, shoot, I don't have your bio." And I said, "Tell you what, I want you to introduce me in the way that you remember me. What are things that you like about me, and what do you remember about me?" And really what I was doing for her was saying, what do you think of when you think of my personal brand?
Oh, I like that, Susan, and it makes it so much more intimate and personal. That should be, since it's a personal brand, but it doesn't have to be some big highfalutin thing or something that we feel uncomfortable about. It can be part of our everyday lives. Well, and speaking of everyday lives, because this is the WOE Network and we're talking about midlife women and honoring our age, a lot of us are going through a reinvention process. So how can we, again, use that personal branding process that you've kind of come up with so that when we do leave the room, people will say, oh, they understand who we are now as we're changing a lot?
Right. I think that it's important for everybody in the workplace and really throughout our lives to be thinking about not so much what do other people think of me, but always that place of of how you interact with the world. And so as people are looking at reinventing themselves in the workplace, I think they need to really take a look at how am I perceived? What do people think of me? Because you can think you're changing all you want, but if no one perceives that change, it doesn't really make any difference. Like your brand on the outside isn't changing. So there are a lot of things I think people can do to really make some of those changes. I mean, one of them is if you've been kind of a closed person, you could start to let a little bit more of your humanness show. So one of the ideas that I like a lot is this idea from one of the books that I actually used as some of his material in my book was a man named Dave Rendell, and he wrote a book on your freak factor. And so I love this idea of what your freak factor is, and not that everybody needs to go out and be freakish in any way, but I think it's that what makes you human? What are those human being parts of yourself that people can connect to? I think in the very first place, you start to let, and I don't mean sitting there and telling your personal life to everybody, but you just start to let people know your humanness so you can connect with them. So I think connections are important, but there are also lots of other things about reinvention. I mean, one of them is often people settle in and they've been happy in their work for a long time, and they don't really think of themselves as an expert because they've been doing it so long. And certainly people around them may not even consider them an expert either. And I think it's important at midlife that you start to own your own expertise and figure out ways to use it. Maybe you give a brown bag lunch talk. Maybe you write a paper about it. But you start to be seen as the go-to expert for something. And that's a way to begin to reinvent yourself a little bit. Another one is be the person with the ideas. Don't be afraid. Don't hold back ideas. So coming up with some new ideas is another way to sort of make yourself stand out at midlife and I guess not be taken for granted. I think that's always a really fear for people at midlife is they've hit that plateau and they're just taken for granted. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think those ideas are great. And one of the things that brought up for me is actually in midlife, I think we have this yearning to become more authentic. So we can take our own freak factor and run with it and be happy about it.
Right.
And also, we can own the fact that, yes, we do have certain areas of expertise. So we can develop them further or also, and you'd mentioned, you know, kind of being the expert, we can also maybe consider mentoring younger employees or mentoring younger people in the neighborhood, whatever. I like those ideas, Susan.
So there are many, and I've got quite a few in the book about midlife and making a midlife transition. But I think the biggest thing is that, and this is even a takeaway for people a little early before they leave, is that just start to observe yourself. Do you let your best self show? Do other people comment on that? Do you ever get feedback about it? Maybe you ask start with your close friends and say, when you think of me, what do you think about? You might ask some of your colleagues at work. And what personal branding really is starting to own your own voice, that authentic piece of who am I and who is it that I want to come across to others. And what the whole personal branding process is that whole process for you to look at that and really start to come out with some of those answers.
Well, that adds, again, more of a spiritual dimension to this, but as we are growing older, those things are a lot more important to us, and and being able to express our strengths, not being shy about them, but being able to, not necessarily being a braggart either, but be able to really speak to, oh yeah, I can handle something like that, and go. There is one thing I want to bring up, though, and it does have to do with age. Both you and I, in our past lives, were career counselors, and we help people find jobs. And also, we both know that as we get older, job seekers tend to have a more difficult time. It does take longer to find work. So using your methods for personal branding, how would someone say who might be watching us, who's 50 or 60, trying to get re-employed, how can they use a branding technique, say, that could overcome some of those negative stereotypes that younger job seekers or younger employers often hold?
Well, I still currently see clients, and it was interesting. I was just at the National Career Development Conference, and so I was just watching some of the other speakers and listening to some things going on. And there was one man I went to who wrote a book called something about being a life artist, and it was really about through transitions. And we were talking about the idea of how baby boomers, he really feels, will continue to reinvent the workforce. And so although age seems to be an issue for people, there are many qualities that baby boomers have that the other generations just don't have. For one thing, we're considered very reliable. Often we're workaholics, not necessarily a good trait, but it's a great saleable skill to employers that we are hard workers. We're a very creative generation. Usually by this age, I'm not having to go home and take care of sick kids. And I certainly don't need to go on maternity leave, so that's great. And so I think that there are a lot of things that are wonderful phases of this particular age that we can sell to the employers, including we have all this expertise and all this wisdom that I think the workplace is sorely missing in many places.
I really agree, and one of the things when I do job search workshops, which I also continue to do, I always stress the fact that we have certainly highly developed problem-solving skills, and we don't get necessarily thrown by a crisis situation because we've been there and done that a lot. So
exactly.
Yeah, all those things are really important. Susan, before we went on air, you mentioned something I want to make sure that we do talk about, because I think this is also a treat for us ladies. But
Mm-hmm.
you think there are certain benefits to being a woman and branding yourself. So what are
Oh,
some of those? Yay!
yay! um, well, first of all, I think as women, I mean, I love working with all clients, so I'm not going to say men or women, but what I particularly love about working with women is, first of all, women seem to get this quicker. And I think some of it is there's so many characteristics that make personal branding and being a woman just go together. We by gender are more social. We tend to be more collaborative. We tend to be more communicative. So we like to express that. We don't mind necessarily asking people some of our opinions on these different things. You know what, I realized I have another program that's clicking, and I'm so sorry on that. And they, you know, I think for women too, we tend to want to work more as a team, and so we want to make relationships work in the workplace. And personal branding is a lot about understanding those relationships and how we impact each other. So I think those are some of the things that I love, you know, just in working with women in that.
Well, and two, that brings up a thought
Mm-hmm.
for me, as you and I are personal friends too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice if you want to share with someone, say, I'm going through this reinvention process, I'm trying to actually rebrand myself. You know, you're going to get some support, you're going to get some
Mm-hmm.
ideas, you're going to get some help. So you know, that's another great thing about women and
Right.
all of this too.
Right, right. So, a couple other things is that this that might go with this is that women tend to also be very community oriented. So, as a group, I often don't hear men talking about getting involved in the community until they've hit, you know, sort of a midlife crisis in their 50s and they want to give back or have meaning. Women have kind of always wanted meaning, and they now want to often show it in the workplace even more. So they tend to be multitaskers and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing too about this age is that a
Mhm.
lot of times we've kind of held ourselves back maybe when we were younger, and you
Mhm.
kind of think, well, okay, if not now, when? So I'm
Right,
ready to go for it.
right, right.
Well, Susan, this has been really enlightening. I want to thank you for your time. And unfortunately, our time is just about up. But
Oh,
I
okay.
do want our viewers to know where they can go to find out more about you, your work, and I'm going to hold this book up again because it is a goodie. Congratulations. This really is, for people, I know I'm thumbing through it quickly, but this has got a lot of information. So tell us where we can find out all that good stuff, Susan.
Well, so my website's easy. It's my name, so Susan Critton, and it's CHRITTON.com. And my email is susan@susancritton.com. My book can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, at Barnes & Noble. Actually, the last time I was in there, it was one of the featured dummies books, which was lovely. So it's and I'll tell you what was really great at the NCDA conference. A lot of people told me they are using my book as the primer to teach college students about personal branding. So they're using my book as their almost textbook to teach kids about personal branding. So that was great.
Well, congratulations on that. And as a midlife reader, well, little post-midlife at this stage, there's a lot of information for people of all ages in that book. So, Susan, thank you for your time. And
Great.
I also want to thank our viewers for tuning in again to Women at Work, The Woe Factor. We do want this show to be a resource for you. So please email us with any ideas, suggestions, thoughts, even guests that you might want to see. And you can do that at work@WONetwork.com. So that's work@WHOA network.com. And I always like to leave you with a little final food for thought. And today's is a quote from Maya Angelou, who said, "There is no greater agony than leaving an untold story inside of you." So that means remember to go out there and get your woe factor on, show the world what you've got, and rebrand yourself for success. This is Mary Eileen Williams at Women at Work saying we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.